That's what I loved about flying Qantas. They give you a meat pie. I thought that was brilliant.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
You had a meat pie?
A proper Australian meat pie.
I only flew them once.
With like tomato ketchup on it.
Yeah.
You know, that's their business class signature dish, a meat pie. I thought it was fabulous.
It's such
Have you flown them?
No. I've never flown Qantas. I mean, maybe I have in my youth, but I don't remember. It doesn't really count.
I've flown them only once. You know, I've on purpose, when I learned that they were ditching the Emirates partnership and not going through Dubai anymore, I flew them from Dubai to London just by exchanging. And I was in first. That was really nice.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, that was really nice. You felt like you're Austin Powers in that seat.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's a very sweet.
And there's only 6 seats in first or something on the A380.
Like that. Yeah,
amazing.
Like yeah, it's really the good old times of pre-pandemic. Of course, now I don't remember which one is what on my sounds. So let's see this one.
I just want to tell you both good luck. We're all counting on you.
Surprise, 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 guys. We have a guest.
Our annual guest.
Well, in many ways, I would say you were the guest. But
that's true. We are.
Yeah, you're hosting us. When we last saw you, Alex wasn't there. That's when he was taking the break. It's almost 3 years to the dot. We recorded on the 20th or 21st of January 2020 when we had the flu, right?
Yeah. I remember you asking us how many of us had the flu. We were all sort of joking. Oh, yes, this COVID flu thing.
Did we even call it COVID back then? I think we just had heard like there was something in China and we're like, oh, there's a flu going on.
Yeah, strange times.
So it's Ed Parsons that is with us. And of course, Alex and I. So we are in person. This is amazing. We're not going to get audio drift, first of all. Really sorry, guys, that we've had that in the past few episodes where Alex is so bright. I mean, he's next to me and we know he's so bright that he's able to read my mind on everything I say before I say it. That's absolutely amazing.
It's a gift. It's a gift.
We know that's why I do it with you, because by myself I would be a disgrace. So Ed Parsons. Before we do that, I need to put the sound. So I'm using this different tool. So I need to find where's the opening credits. I hope it's the little pad here. Let's see, guys. There you go. Thank you so much, Ed, for inviting us back to Google.
It's my pleasure. You're very welcome. It's in the week before Christmas. So everything is nice and quiet and Christmassy in the office.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, we need to say we're recording that on the 22nd of December 2022. I was about to say 2023 for some reason. This is for once not going to go out today. It's going to go out on the 31st as a surprise for all of you. This is why Alex and I didn't wish you happy holidays at the end of the previous episode. We knew this was coming. So I guess we can say Merry Christmas, although you will have heard that for us, it's not there yet. We're very happy with the final of the World Cup. We're going to stop talking about that.
God. That was amazing.
That was incredible, right? So maybe, Ed, can you, for those who haven't listened to the episode, I think it was 105. Yeah, pretty sure 105 DCA. And we should actually say hello to Dan and Elizabeth. We're not with us today. I'm sure they're very jealous not being here, actually. For those who haven't listened, can you just give us like a 2-minute intro about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so the easiest way to think of me is the Google Maps guy. That's the way I generally describe myself. My job is mostly evangelism and policy around how we build Google Maps, Google Earth, how your location is stored on your mobile phone, that little blue dot on Google Maps. I'm behind the scenes helping all of that work. And so, I've been a geographer since I was as a child, grew up, learned a little bit of computer science myself, and I've been in what we call geospatial industry for most of my career.
Yeah, so thank you for Google Maps, by the way, which really is a lifesaver everywhere we go. I'm going to say very easy because actually you gave us the idea of why we should invite you back at a very, very tail end of that episode 105 and I didn't even know about it, when just we're about to stop the recording, you say, oh, and I could tell you about the time when I visited all the Concorde in existence. And it was like, what? We don't have any more time to record. So 3 years later, almost to the dot, we can actually finally talk about that. We'll talk so that you guys know you've heard Ed's name very, very often on the show because you interact a lot with us. You've been a very loyal one of our most loyal, actually, listeners. So thank you very, very much for that. It gives us a lot of information, especially about BA, because you're a very heavily traveler with BA. You're GGL.
Yes, gold guest list.
We'll get into that because neither Alex and I are GGL.
No, I have questions, not just about what it entails, but how you achieve it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, because for us, it's a mystery, access to the Concorde Room and stuff like that. But we're going to start with the Concorde, since I just said Concorde Room, but the Concorde, the actual plane. Did you fly the Concorde?
I did fly the Concorde.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm lucky in that I travel a lot for my job, and I traveled a lot for my previous jobs, which allowed me to build up status, to build up air miles, as they were once called, avios these days. And being an av geek, I have often said I think my first memory was actually as a small child living in Balham, southwest London, hearing the prototype Concorde fly over my house and hiding under the table because it was the loudest thing I or actually anyone in the neighborhood had heard at the time. This was in, I think, the autumn, September 1970, and Concorde diverted to land at Heathrow Airport rather than going back to Fairford, the prototype. So that was my earliest memory. And growing up in southwest London, Concorde was a regular part of all of our lives. Every morning at 11 o'clock, we'd see Concorde flying over on the dot. You could almost set your watch by it, and it was part of our lives. So after traveling lots at work, I kind of built up enough air miles and enough money in the bank to pay the taxes and so on, so that when the Concorde was retired back in 2003, there was an opportunity for me to fly back from New York to London. And I made the choice to fly back because there was a very unique takeoff that Concorde had to do at JFK. It had to take off and basically turn within Jamaica Bay, which is just where JFK Airport is, for noise abatement reasons. So it would take off and then immediately do a 30-degree bank and keep that bank for about 200 degrees, so it could then kind of turn around and then fly out.
Wow.
And it was, the closest to taking off in a fighter plane, I guess you could imagine. People ask me what it was, like. How does it compare to a conventional airliner? For me, it was a bit like the difference between being a modern BMW, Mercedes, and an E-Type Jaguar. You felt every bump on the runway. You felt the acceleration very, very much, and it felt agile. It felt bouncy. You felt every movement while it took off. It was extraordinary. I was so glad I had the opportunity, and never flown faster, never flown higher, and never will.
Yeah, and we will never.
I don't know. I'm not. I don't convinced in any way that we will.
Yeah, especially, we keep hearing about Overture. What's it? No, Boom,
all those guys.
Boom, Overture. Yeah, I don't see it.
Same.
You need an engine.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't have an engine.
No.
Yeah.
And they because everybody talks about the commitments they have with United, but they're just MOUs at the end of the day. We don't know it's going to...
It's been a great PR machine. They've done a fantastic job, and the renderings look brilliant, but, without engines, and the engines were, a major part of Concorde's success. They took military jet engines, they added an afterburner because they weren't designed to have an afterburner. And, that was the secret of success, but it's not something you can do easily.
No.
Yeah. And also let's put it that way. I wish them luck. I really hope Alex and I, especially because you have done that, we can one day travel at that speed. So the flights you saw when you were a kid, it was the test flights, right?
Yeah, there were 20 Concordes originally built, only 20, and that was all of them. There were 2 prototypes. So I saw the British prototype. There were 2 pre-production aircraft, and then there were 16 that sort of entered service. In reality, only 14 entered service with Air France and British Airways. So moved the clock forward 20 years almost. In my midlife crisis as such, I decided, one, to learn to fly. So I did that.
Oh, wow.
And that was expensive, as Alex will, I'm sure, agree. The other one was
better than golf, though, surely.
It's much better than golf, yeah.
Did you do that here in the UK?
I did that here in the UK at Fair Oaks, which is near Woking. which was part of the problem. It's very congested airspace.
I was about to say, can you fly anywhere?
No, I mean, I used to fly down to Goodwood for a cup of coffee and a cake, and then fly back. And that was, that was £400 down the spout just to go and have a cup of coffee somewhere. Yeah. So, it made no sense. The other thing, because I was traveling, I suddenly thought, well, there are these Concordes that have now been retired in museums all around the world. Many of them, reasonably close to us here in London. Yeah. I thought, well, why not go and visit them? That would be fun. I could combine that with some of my business travel, which I did. So in 2016, from about, I think, May 2016 into the beginning of 2017, I went and I visited the remaining Concordes, the 18 remaining Concordes.
18? 18. I was thinking, I think I've done like 7 or 8. That must be all of them. 18. There are 18 in museums.
There are 18 surviving Concordes. One, unfortunately, we know, the one that crashed in Paris.
Yeah.
The other one was broken up by Air France.
What?
Yes. Yeah, people keep quiet about that one, but one was broken up.
Really?
Yeah.
I want to get into the whole conspiracy stuff a little bit later as we talk about that, because there's so many of these little badly written mystery novel-esque theories about the one still functioning Concorde. So the prototype.
Yeah.
Is that the one at Yeovilton?
The prototype is the one at Yeovilton and the one in Paris at the Musée de l'Air in Le Bourget.
Yeah.
I've been to the one in Yeovilton. My grandfather, who was an Air Commodore in the Air Force and did some of the testing on the prototype, original prototype, lived 10 minutes from Yeovilton. And so whenever we were out there, and there's, for the record, absolutely sweet FA around that area other than Royal Naval Air Station Yeovilton, which has a fantastic museum. And so we would go there all of the time, and that Concorde there it's one of the ones with all the testing equipment still in it, as opposed to the mock-ups or anything like that some of the other ones have. So that to me was, as a 6 or 7-year-old, was really intimidating. Like, this doesn't look comfortable or fun at all. It's almost Doctor Who, and it's still there, still there. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. They look after it particularly well, and they do look different. We have a vision of what Concorde looked like.
Yeah.
Yes, the prototypes looked pretty much the same, but there are distinct differences. Particularly the cockpit was very, I always kind of think of it as sort of Buck Rogers. There was no real forward view. 2 tiny little windows you could see out of the front, and it had a different tail. And the engines were completely different to the ones that were in the production aircraft. Much kind of more rough and ready, more military style. So much louder, hence the experience I had as a child.
Memories.
Yeah, so those are the 2 prototypes at Yeovilton and Le Bourget. Then there were 2 pre-production aircraft. One's at Duxford here in the UK. The other one, sadly, is in a car park at Orly Airport near the Carrefour supermarket on the edge of the airport.
No way.
Yeah.
What?
I have not been to that. I didn't even know about that one.
I've been to Orly so many times, I didn't know there was one over there.
I thought you were going to talk. Okay, keep going. Keep going. This is fascinating.
Yeah, so the contrast between where these aircraft end up and how they're looked after is really interesting. So
the one at Orly.
Yes.
So the one at Yeovilton and the one at Le Bourget, you can go inside, you can walk around. They're in hangars. Is the one at Le Bourget in a hangar?
Yeah.
Immaculate. And then you're saying there's this one at Orly in a car park in Carrefour.
Yeah. There's one in
accessible.
It's run by some enthusiasts, volunteers. I visited there back in 2016. It was open some weekends, but not all. And the grass was growing quite long around it, and it was a pretty sorry state for the pre-production Concorde.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the one that's least loved, alongside the one that's at Heathrow Airport, Alpha Bravo, which we all see as we kind of fly in and land at 27 left.
Genuinely sad.
Yes. Agreed.
It's so my heart sinks every time, and I don't say that with any kind of hyperbole. I feel something every single time I see that airplane.
Yeah,
it's so disrespectful.
Yeah, the way it is just there.
Yeah, with all of the the scissor lifts and just parked around it like it's another piece of
junk. And I as part of my quest, I wanted to get my photograph taken in front of each of the aircraft. So, I felt like a real criminal, kind of sneaking into the staff car park to get a view of this piece of, wonderful aviation history.
Can you get quite close?
Not really. Yeah. So I was in the staff car park and the airport police came along and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm just taking a photograph," and they searched me and they let me go on my way. Okay. But it's in no way accessible. And I think partially both British Airways and Heathrow Airport are a bit embarrassed by it. Neither of them, I think it's owned by the airport now. British Airways gave it to the airport. And I think there was originally a view, although this may still be rumours, I think there was originally a view to put it, that roundabout outside Terminal 5, really big roundabout, just the right size to put Concorde.
That would be nice.
Like the one at Charles de Gaulle in Paris, but it didn't, for whatever reason, happen.
It just seems like such an easy win.
Yeah. But I think it was the time that British Airways were kind of embarrassed that they'd retired it, and it was the flagship of the fleet as such, and it was retired no longer. They wanted to ignore it, and
we'll get to that because that's part of the conspiracy theory.
Yeah, there's
So go on. So that's 4.
That's 4. So those are the prototypes and the pre-production, and then there were 2 development aircraft. One which is Brooklands Museum in southwest London, and that's a great one if you want to experience what it was like on Concorde, because they let you sit in the aircraft. The seats are the original seats that were taken out just as the aircraft was retired, so the Connolly leather blue seats, really very comfy.
That's a great museum. Yeah. Anyway, for a civil aviation geek, they have some beautiful. It's same with Duxford as well. Actually, if you're a civil aviation as opposed to a military aviation enthusiast, those 2 are so great for it. Exactly, because these are unique airplanes as they were.
Yeah,
and not kind of sanitized or anything like that. I love both of those places.
Yeah, and then the other equivalent post-production or development aircraft is again at Toulouse in France at the Airbus facility, Aeroscopia.
Yeah.
And then the remaining 14 went into the British Airways and Air France fleets. And when they retired from both airlines, were distributed to museums all around the world. There are one in Washington, at Seattle at the Museum of Flight. There's one at the Washington, D.C. Uvar Hazy Museum, which is one of the best aviation museums anywhere.
They both are. Seattle with the prototype 74, 72, 73, 78.
Yeah.
That's the one where I cried. I cried like a little girl, and I am not ashamed of it.
Yeah. Where else? Well, it's one in New York at the Intrepid Museum. Yes. But unfortunately, it's parked outside, and I was there this autumn, and it's looking a bit weather beaten, to be honest. It needs a bit of paint, I think. And then most of the others are in Europe. The other odd one in many ways, and this is the one I always had the most issues with my family explaining. I want to go and see all the Concordes. They thought, well, fair enough. Actually, one of them is retired to a museum in Barbados.
What?
Yeah, so I had to convince the family that I was going just to see this retired airplane in Barbados, which actually was the reason I went. And it's
we trust you, but
and they do a very nice job,
But is it in a museum?
It's in a museum. They built a special hangar for it.
Wow!
I wonder
it's a great
how
display.
That came to be.
Yeah, fabulous. Because it used to be able to do a day trip to Barbados.
I was about to say.
Yeah, I think in the mid-90s you could, because it flew to New York and then from New York on to Barbados. You could literally do a day trip where you could fly, go for a little bit of a paddle because the airport was quite close to a beach, get back on and be back in time on the same day. Just incredible.
Unreal. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that would have been fun, eh?
Is that one well preserved?
Really well preserved. They've done a nice job of that.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And I guess the other one that stands out as being special is the one in Sinsheim in Germany, where it's on the roof of the museum next to the Tubelow 2144. So the two are parked next to each other, both sort of angled as if they were taking off, and it looks extraordinary.
And you can make out if they're actually different or not.
Yeah, and they are very different.
Yeah, they are.
Really, really different. Yeah.
Wow.
Were you able to get to have a picture in front of that one?
Yeah.
So you can go to the roof?
Yeah, that's easy, relatively easy too.
Oh, well, relatively easy. Legally or?
No, legally. You can,
you had to jump on the roof.
Yeah, and you can actually, I don't think you can get in the Concorde, but you can get in the 2144 and you can kind of walk up the sort of 30-degree angle that the plane is at. And it's very agricultural, shall we say. Yeah, like many Russian airliners, it was put together with nuts and bolts, no messing about.
Wow.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, the seats were still in there as well, or in that one?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I need to see that one actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was it. It took me a year or so, and it was good fun, and it was interesting just to see the differences in the way that they're displayed, and how much care there is for some, but not for others.
Which one was your favorite? Either your favorite by emotion or favorite because how it was preserved?
I guess my favorite was the one I flew on, which was Alpha Charlie. That actually happened to be the flagship of the British Airways fleet. So the registration was Golf Bravo Oscar Alpha Charlie.
Oh, lovely.
BOAC, yeah.
And that's retired to the museum in Manchester. So again, that's one you can go on. And there's a little bit of a tour. You can go and sit in the cockpit, and I was able to sit in the seat that I sat in. And,
nice.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that was nice.
Oh, that's very nice.
Wow. I mean, I think what's crazy about Concorde is that so much time has passed that a generation of adults, it's lore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That plane was, it's almost Star Wars, in a galaxy far away.
Yes, exactly.
But it was a truly incredible airplane born out of post-war Britain.
It was.
And the performance was unbelievable.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Like nothing we have access to.
Nearly 1,400 miles an hour. When I flew back, cruised about 1,300 miles an hour at 60,000 feet, which is just extraordinary if you think about it. The pilot would always make this comment that, depending upon when it was, there were only 4 or 5 people higher than us, and they were on the space station.
Yeah.
It was just amazing to think about it. And, it was in many ways Europe's answer to the Apollo program. It was the same time. It cost huge sums of money. It was clearly, a financial white elephant.
Yeah.
They built 20. There were high hopes, obviously, of building far more, but they never did. And it really was on the edge of technical capability. The reason that it took off very regularly, and we all set our watches by seeing Concorde taking off over southwest London, is it got priority to take off at Heathrow, because if it was waiting more than 5 minutes longer than planned, it would have run out of fuel on the one-way, and they would have had to cancel the flight. So it was like, okay, 11 o'clock, go, off you go, and it worked like clockwork.
It's and then the numbers that you just said are staggering, but also the times getting to New York in half the time, maybe 2/3 of the time that it would take now. It's just something we can't wrap our heads around.
Yeah.
As modern travelers sitting on a 7-hour flight to New York going, come on, when you're just zipping across in Concorde. And there's all those iconic photos that come up on Reddit every week that, some military jet was tasked to take a picture of Concorde at cruise speed and couldn't keep up with it and for more than 90 seconds and had to peel off again. And the Blackbird was still only the fastest plane that carried a human being.
The Blackbird needs to use its afterburner all the time.
All the time, yes.
Where Concorde, you did the afterburner to take off and to accelerate, but when it was cruising, the afterburner was switched off. It was just... And
in a Blackbird, the pilot had to be in a spacesuit, whereas you were having a glass of champagne.
Indeed.
Reading a book. Really extraordinary.
Talking about that, how was because there's all these again, if you go on Reddit, like people say, yeah, but the seats were kind of narrow and it was kind of, the usual stuff. So tell us about the experience on the Concorde. How was it? I mean, of course, it was one of the last flights. So obviously, that was emotional, but how was it as a passenger?
Yeah, I mean, the passenger experience was clearly different to the wide bodies that were around at the time. So, I flew out to New York on a 747, like everybody did, and that was nice and obviously very comfortable. It felt, I suppose, like an E-jet, like an Embraer. That's what it felt like. Maybe slightly smaller than an Embraer, but 2x2, no in-flight entertainment. Well, I think there was a audio channel, and we were given headphones, and if you wanted to, you could listen to classical music selection or whatever.
One of these kind of stethoscope type of headphones?
Yeah.
Pressure ones.
I think I remember they were a nice pair of Sennheiser headphones, obviously, because,
Oh, yeah, Concorde.
Oh, it was Concorde. So,
was it loud? Was it loud in the cabin?
Yeah, it was really loud. So, you had to have the volume turned up. And the thing that I think probably most surprised me about the whole experience was the size of the windows.
Yeah, that always
small,
strikes me.
But they're really, really small. They're sort of not much larger than a playing card. Really, really small.
Oh, that's that. Yeah.
And they got really hot with the friction of the air passing by them. So you couldn't put your hand against the window when it was, at full tilt because it would just be too hot.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was, but you didn't notice. You were given champagne, canapes, a nice meal. The time flew by.
And I suppose at that height, you're pretty much immune to any turbulence. You're above jet streams, you're above cloud, there's nothing.
Yeah, and there's obviously no sense of speed. You could look down, you could see the clouds moving, but you did really have a sense of being that much higher.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
Than conventional aircraft. You think flying across the Atlantic, if you're at 40,000 feet, you think you're quite high. This is at 60,000 feet. So, it really is that much higher.
I wish they had, of course, it's a different era. I wish they had like external cameras that you could sort of take off with, like the Airbus.
Yeah, so you could see the curvature of the Earth, but you'd have to sort of step back and look through 5 or 6 windows, and then you'd be able to see it. But yeah, it was quite clear that you could see the curvature of the Earth.
Wow.
At what time did it take off from JFK?
I think it was mid-morning, if I remember rightly.
Because you could do a day flight.
Yeah, it was a bit of a contrast because I was staying in Midtown, and I ended up, because at the time, I was trying to save my money despite going on Concorde. I took a shared van to JFK. So I was the only guy that went into the Concorde Room at JFK from a shared van, I think, probably. Yeah, so I think it was maybe lunchtime, mid-afternoon. We arrived back at Heathrow at 3:00. So probably about the same time that we left New York.
Because I've heard many people say that a lot of people based in London or in the UK would go to New York with the Concorde, but would fly back on like a 747, so they could simply sleep because it was less of an advantage of midday, whereas it was a huge advantage of actually arriving.
Yes, because you had a full day in New York.
In New York, exactly, right?
Yeah. So I think, and then that was very much why it existed. It existed, pre the days of video conferencing or the internet. If you wanted an important business meeting in New York for the day, you could do that. You could go, you could have your meeting and then fly home. And you'd still be home in time to tuck the kids in bed that evening.
Wow.
When you think about that, it's insane.
I know. Absolutely unbelievable.
Absolutely. Was it? I know it's a silly question because I went to one, but since we're recording for people that might never actually been into a Concorde, did it feel cramped in terms of height as well, in terms of the tube itself?
It does. And I think that actually the most claustrophobic element of it was that when you got on board, you get on board at the port door at the very front, as you do with every airliner. And then, you turn right and then you'd walk through a very narrow corridor where basically the computers were. And this, is very much the reflection of this is 1950s, early 60s technology. The first quarter of the airplane almost was computers. And you'd have to walk through this very narrow corridor between these banks of computers to get to your seats. And that was the most claustrophobic part of it, I think. Yeah, it does feel. It did feel claustrophobic relative to the wide bodies, but hey. In the future, we're probably all going to be flying narrow bodies across the Atlantic.
Yeah, definitely seems to be the trend.
We're going back in time.
Dreadful idea.
Yeah.
Well, I did JetBlue and I was fine because I was in the front. But I mean, more and more 321 XLRs, right?
Yeah, XLRs, yeah.
So you took that flight when? Remind us.
This was in May 2003, and it was retired in October of 2003. So, I kind of, as soon as it was announced that it was going to be retired, I got all of the Avios air miles at the time I had, completely bankrupted my account. And, the taxes then weren't too bad. So I was able to pay for it that way. And it was treated as a first class ticket as far as British Airways were concerned.
Yeah, obviously. Well, it's a good. I would just bankrupt all my miles across all my programs to do one single flight.
Especially when the opportunity is going to no longer be available in 6 months.
Yeah.
I think that would have been the motivation for me.
Which is very, I know I'm making a slight parenthesis here, which is very frustrating because the 744 disappeared mostly during the pandemic. So it was not a real last shot. You're like, oh, if I want to, no, too late.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw, especially with BA, they really did. They parked them and then they got rid of them. There was no opportunity to do one last flight on the BA 747.
Yeah.
And that was heartbreaking.
It really was. Yeah. I remember during the lockdown, because I lived relatively close to Heathrow, I walked to Heathrow and wandered around the maintenance hangars, and just to see them all lined up, it was just so sad.
It's
so sad.
And we were talking, I don't know if it was on a podcast or just out in the open, but that they are increasingly difficult to find.
Yeah.
On any airline now.
Yeah.
748 at least. At least Lufthansa is installing the new seats, so they're meaning that they're probably committing for a little bit.
I mean, it's funny you talk about it. I think if you ever had the opportunity to fly upstairs on the 744 of British Airways, that little cabin they had up there, that was quite close to the Concorde experience.
I loved that.
It was very intimate. You had those two cabin crew that looked after you.
Yeah. For a while, Virgin had an economy cabin. Half of the upper deck was an economy cabin. I would push over an old lady to get up there because you felt badass being up there, but you were paying a normal economy fare.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the retirement of the Concorde, because when it was announced, I think a lot of us thought, nah, it's not. This isn't the end. It's the end for British Airways and Air France, but you can't get rid of the Concorde. And there were all these rumors. This is just around the time when I had started my association with the Virgin Group. And Uncle Richard started making a lot of noise, like, oh, we're going to take him and we're going to use him because it's British engineering and it's blah, 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 blah. And I think he was reasonably serious about trying to acquire them. And BA did whatever they could to prevent that from happening. And I think
Is that a fact?
Well, this is the interesting. This is the crucible of so many of these conspiracy theories, one of which was they were deliberately sabotaged to make sure that they could never be made airworthy again. I don't think that's actually possible, but that was the prevailing. They had been sabotaged to make sure that they could never fly again.
Well, I think you're right. There are loads of conspiracy theories around this. I think fundamentally the decision was made by the two manufacturers. So the manufacturers have to stand behind any airliner and maintain it and provide airworthiness directives and so on and so forth. When Airbus, as it was then, decided, right, we're not going to do this anymore, the choice was made for the airlines. British Airways and Air France didn't have much choice. There is lots of conspiracy around how much of the decision making between Air France and Airbus was, hey, Air France had never made money on Concorde.
Compared to,
They were desperate to stop flying it.
Let go,
British Airways, I think, probably would have wanted to carry on flying because they'd invested a lot of money in refurbishing the fleet after the post-crash grounding.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they were really that keen, but they didn't have much choice. Certainly Virgin couldn't have done so because Airbus wouldn't allow them to fly it.
Yeah. And I think it was typical Branson bluster.
Yeah.
How could British Airways do this and all of that stuff? But the sabotage was interesting. That one kept coming back up. And the other one was that there was a group of engineers who were secretly maintaining the airworthiness of one of the models.
Times, yeah.
And I think it might have been, I don't know which one it was. It's one of the UK ones that they were going in there and they were doing all the things that one needs to do, which is the sort of counterbalance to the deliberate. Neither is possible.
Yeah.
Really, when you think about it, like you have 75-plus-year-old Spitfires happily spinning around the sky on a daily basis. You can maintain these things. I mean, is there a shred of original material on any of those? Probably not at this point, you know? But if you think about, you go to air shows and you think, you look at what's flying, there aren't a lot of jet passenger aircraft performing. You just don't see them flying around. I mean, you see prop planes, you see, you know, the de Havilland Dragons flying around. DC-3 is not a great example because it started live. Constellations, and even then they are. But you don't see, you know, a DC-8.
No.
You don't see a TriStar as much as I would love to see.
Oh, yeah, TriStar especially.
As soon as they lose manufacturer support, then it becomes...
Yeah. And they're incredibly complex machines.
Yeah, I was about to say, hobbyists cannot really do it.
And, you know, there's a differentiator with, you know, air shows are my thing. When I'm not working or traveling, I go to air shows. And there's a very distinct line where you can have warbirds, Spitfires, Mustangs, so on and so forth. As soon as you get to what they call complex, i.e. it's got a hydraulic system and it's got multiple engines, that's way out of the capability of you know, amateurs to manage. And that's why I think isn't John Travolta had a 707 for a while?
Yeah.
I think that was the real outlier. But it would be wonderful. Someone had a, you know, in the future, preserved 747. How amazing would that be?
I think it's almost necessary.
Don't you have in Kent like a parking space, like in Orly?
Sure
you can just park there, one there, and wait 20 years.
Yes, I'm sure I can make that happen at some point. It's necessary. It's necessary as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you have so many of these unusual models, you know, like the 747 SP that NASA used for atmospheric observations, I think, that just is going to be parked now forever. It just had its last flight. It feels wrong, but I completely understand it at the same time. To see those, you go to Mojave or any of those other places where big heavy jets are stored or put to death, it's unnatural.
Yeah.
It's unnatural as far as I'm concerned. But I get it. I can rationalize it, but it doesn't make it any less painful.
Yeah. And you know, I think for many of us, Concorde, because of the aesthetics, you know, it was just a beautiful machine. You know,
it's like one of these, you put a poster on your wall as a kid, like people do with Lamborghinis, you know, because it was so epic and so different and so futuristic. Even today, you look at it and you're like, we're talking about something that will happen one day.
Yeah.
It's not an old aircraft.
It's so strange to say that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's the same for the 747. I think it's a similar aesthetic. You know, lots of curves. You know, I think, is it Richard Rogers used to say it looked a bit like a Sabre jet fighter. You know, the bump was like the canopy of a fighter plane. Yeah. And I think that there's some truth in that. And, you know, best will in the world, an A330 isn't that attractive.
No,
you know?
very functional. And neither is this 777-200, if we're being honest. I mean, they are not. There's something graceful about the Dreamliner, but that was a generational leap in aircraft development, just like the 747 wasn't. But the Concorde was, to your point, Paul. It's like I'm looking forward to going back to the past. To us getting there in the future, to a technology that's 60 years old.
And also there's something to say about design. It's like, I'm not into cars, but if you look at all the cars that were made in the 60s and the 70s, and you look at the cars nowadays, mostly for, you know, health and safety reasons, for not hitting pedestrians, they all look the same.
Yeah.
They're not as, you know, epic as, you know, like cars that, you know, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I mean, maybe that's a bit that as well. This is what a Dreamliner or a 350... I mean, they look cool. You know, they made some effort with the windows and from the cowl, the engine. You know, like these sharp things in the back. I mean, it looks cool, but it's not epic.
And I think you're right. There's that commonality, isn't there? Because you know, our future is going to be made of small twin-engined aircraft or maybe larger twin-engined aircraft.
Don't say that.
Maybe
Not only small, please.
if there are, if hydrogen comes along as an alternative fuel source, maybe there will be different designs. But fundamentally, today all airliners look pretty much similar to each other. Really small twins to really large twins. That's it. Well, when I was a child standing on top of the Queen's building at Heathrow, every airliner looked different. You had engines at the back, you had engines under the wings, you had Concorde, you had T-tails, you had Russian airliners that looked like jet fighters and were smoky, and there was so much diversity in design. Now they all look pretty much the same, and they're all painted white.
And it was all based on the received wisdom at the time, right? Like,
white,
I don't know if you do this, but whenever I get on a BA flight that has IFE, the first thing I watch, especially when we're just sitting on the ground, is all of the old BA paraphernalia and propaganda that they used to put out, all the Imperial Airways stuff, all the BOAC stuff, just ridiculous stuff. And one of them is about the Comet, and then the other one is about the DC-10.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the engines are on the back because that's where they're supposed to be. That's where engines live. Why wouldn't they be? And it's like, we've kind of figured out that that's not the case, but we've kind of landed at this point where engineering wisdom is now universal.
Yeah.
And also we know now what works best at some point also.
And we're also thinking a lot more about performance.
Yeah. And economical performance as well.
Yeah,
you need to be able to make money for the airline.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to buy it. Yeah, you're not going to buy it because it was made in the country that you represent, because there's a European manufacturer and there's an American manufacturer. Embraer is kind of figuring out where they live.
And China is coming in. Let's see where they go with
but
they don't even look that different. They look like Airbus.
They don't.
You've ended up in the same way that cars all look pretty much the same. Then airliners all look pretty much the same. I think, there may be this shift with alternative fuel sources, but that's some way off.
A lot of. So do you give any credence to, going back to the Concorde, any credence to any of the conspiracy theories about the Concorde?
No. I think my general view of life is that there are cock-ups and conspiracy theories, and usually it's the cock-up that's the real reason. I think
incompetence or like the simplest reason.
Economics killed Concorde,
I agree.
And if it hadn't been retired in 2003, it would have been retired in 2010, maybe.
Well, 2008 with the crisis.
2008.
Maybe.
Well, it's worth acknowledging, I think, as well, that for something that was essentially designed on paper, like everything was theory. We don't know if this is going to work. We don't know if strapping an afterburner it might not work. It may work. Its safety record was staggering.
Yeah.
Given the performance, given the forces that were acting on that airframe time, that there was only one hull loss is staggering to me. And I think that's kind of lost. Well, it's built to fly. It's look at it. It belongs in the air. But it operated for what? How many years? 40 something years?
Yeah, so 77 to 2003.
Okay, so
so not very long, really, if you compare with most modern airliners.
Right.
But you're right. It really was always on the edge of what was possible.
It was a spaceship.
It was a spaceship, and it was pushing the edge of technology at the time in a way that you wouldn't do today.
Yeah.
No one would have six prototype aircraft in the same way that we did then. There's no computer-aided design as such.
Yeah.
It's guys with French curves and slide rules.
It really is a testament to that. I think that generation of engineer.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the point you made about cars and the way that they looked, and they were, and the Apollo program. I mean, they were going, it might work.
Yeah. I think the big jumps, you look at Apollo 8, what a crazy mission. Yeah. Let's go round the moon at Christmas just
see what happens.
See what happens.
It'll be funny.
Yeah. Different days.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to sound old guys when we talk about this, but to a certain extent, I think even if you simply look, something that both Alex and I, maybe you as well, we look at simply general design, whether it's simply branding. You look at what's nowadays, everything seems to look very similar, very beige, very, there's a bit of sameness for branding, because it has to be readable on a phone, so it has to be, the lettering cannot be completely crazy and everything. And I think we arrive at a certain apex of engineering, so we know exactly what works, how it works best to make money as well. And it's a bit, so that's why there's kind of, when we look at him,
there is space for differentiation.
I agree,
Going back
course.
to Alex's, career with Virgin America, it was something different. And I think there's always that opportunity when we get into this, it's going to be a tough couple of years, probably financially.
Correct.
And for the airline industry, it's not going to be easy, but there's opportunities to differentiate yourself. If you can't do that based on the aircraft, well, what else can you do?
Yeah.
And I think there's still opportunities for that.
I've been flown, it was one, I forgot, guys, which episode. The one when I discussed JetBlue. It was different. It was flying something different over the Atlantic. And I was like, just because of that, I would actually inch myself towards flying it again.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm talking to someone who's very, very loyal to BA, but it is different. And even when we keep talking, I mean, I don't think you've ever done Qatar, but even simply, besides the fact that it's, of course, the seat is amazing, that Q suite, it is a bit different. And you're like, I'm going to give it, it's not as different as, of course, a Concorde. But also that there's a bit of a novelty that you don't have that much, and it's interesting. I think, you're right. There is space, and there's space also in the soft product and how they welcome you, which is what you guys tried at Virgin. You were also differentiating not only on the product itself, but how the culture, or how you felt the culture of the airline as a passenger. Meaning.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I take away from that Virgin America experience, and that salved my wounds for years after it disappeared, was that it died to drag the rest of the American domestic market into the 21st century. And I think that was a noble and ambitious thing to do, when really it was just kind of bringing it up to par with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But when you don't have somebody who's thinking a little bit grander than what's available, instead of doing things incrementally, you do them in a slightly more revolutionary approach, then that type of change is never going to happen. And I think that's what yielded so much of the technological advancement of the 60s, was that marriage of theory and imagination.
Absolutely. And also the dream.
Yeah, I mean,
there was something about progress and innovation that was by definition hopeful.
Yeah.
We're going to make better, we're going to go faster, we're going to bigger. And whereas nowadays there's a bit of anxiety about progress.
Yeah.
By the way, we don't even use the term progress anymore. We shifted to innovation now, which is more kind of business-like. But there's the word progress that, like, medicine and science will solve our illnesses and everything.
Yeah.
That's a bit now kind of, so I think it's just a general mood.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. Although, maybe the giant leap will be in a slightly different direction. So in the past, in the 60s, it was higher and faster. So in the next decades, it's going to be more efficient, greener.
Yeah.
There's plenty of scope for innovation in that space. The challenges are every bit as big. If you look at the energy density of Jet A1 compared to a battery, no one's going to fly across the Atlantic on a battery-powered airplane. That's just not going to happen. So something's going to have to fill the gap.
Do you think, I know I'm jumping completely, do you think, because you just talked about what could happen and that people would not do, because it's something that's always in the background, do you think we'll have, at least for a short haul, single pilot operations?
Oof, that's a good question.
Because they're pushing. I mean, we know Ryanair is trying to push. We know, I mean, to what extent is always exaggerated in the press, because of course people like to bash on Ryanair for being low cost, whereas actually they have
you might see it for sort of short haul cargo operations initially. Maybe that's where it will start. I think it's a very conservative industry for very good reasons, and I still don't see it for passenger
I can't imagine pilot unions going, that sounds fine.
Same.
I just don't see it happening.
Same. But I know that I think I read that Airbus is doing research, at least in that field.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have to be ready.
If you're thinking that that's the future, and then you're developing systems with that
in mind,
then the systems will only get better.
Yeah.
And you'll alleviate pilot the workload and reduce some of these CRM related accidents that happen. I mean, less and less and less, but I think that can only be a good thing, even if we never get, and I don't even know how comfortable I would be knowing that there's only one. And what is it like,
And then,
there's so many questions that I don't want to.
I'm sorry, if the economics of your flight ends up with the pilot being the most expensive element you want to cut, something's gone very badly wrong
100%.
there.
That's a great point. That's a great
100%.
point.
The 100%. So let's move on from Concorde. I mean, we'll still talk about Concorde, but I mean, you've been traveling a lot. We'll go at the tail end, guys. If you're interested about elite status on BA, we'll get there at some point. But I've seen, simply because I follow you on both Instagram and of course on Twitter, but you also have a website. Is it edparsons.com?
edparsons.com and photos.edparsons.com,
Yeah, exactly.
which is my hobby now.
That's where I wanted to go, because through the photos that you've been putting out, I've seen that not only you've been traveling quite a bit in 2022 and a bit before as well, looking almost like 2019, but also that you've been to a lot of air shows, it seems, because there's a lot of jet fighters that I've seen on your photos. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so it didn't take me very long to work out that being a private pilot was not a sustainable hobby for me. So I decided that I would, cash in the money I was spending on avgas on Sony photography equipment.
Oh, you're a Sony guy.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm a Sony guy, mirrorless now. And so I now spend certainly the summers going to air shows around the world, photographing jets and warbirds and so on and so forth. But also in the winter, go out at night. There's a whole kind of subculture of photography about taking pictures of aircraft that are floodlit at night at museums, and that's quite fun to do. So yeah, that's become my passion now, and I enjoy going to air shows, but I also enjoy going to strange places. Like Alex this summer was in Mojave, and it's a great photography destination.
I agree.
So many great photographic opportunities of the boneyards and old airplanes. You can literally just be driving along the road and there's a plane at the side of the road that someone's turned into a bar or something.
Yeah.
And it's just fabulous. And so that's what I do. And yeah, photos.edparsons.com is where I put my best of my photos.
So what have been the highlights of your, let's call it a tour?
My tour.
Since we came back for travel after this horrendous COVID era.
Yeah, I think probably it was this trip to California I did this last autumn was great, because it was the first air show to be held at Edwards Air Force Base in over 10 years. So Edwards Air Force Base is very historically famous. It's where the sound barrier was originally broken, and this was an air show to celebrate that.
Oh, wow.
So there were lots of exotic test aircraft there. There was the aircraft that was used in Top Gun Maverick.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
Which lots of people had their photographs taken in front of. And actually, it looks very realistic, despite it probably being made of plywood and polystyrene.
They worked with Lockheed on the Skunk Works
and
team
it had
on
like
that,
the
didn't
Skunk
they?
Works logo on it and everything.
Oh,
and that was fun. But, it was amazing, talking about Concorde again, it was amazing to be there. And because Edwards Air Force Base is literally in the middle of nowhere, they could break the sound barrier. So at the beginning of the show, each day, they had an F-18 break the sound barrier over the airbase. And if you've not heard of it, most of us haven't heard the sound barrier being broken. It's an extraordinary sound. It really is a loud double bang that you can't ignore. And, all the car alarms went off and everything. And yeah, that was a great fun experience.
How did you get in? Was this open to the public?
This was open to the public, but I had managed, because went with some friends who had base access to get to other parts of the airbase that we couldn't do normally. NASA have got a museum of some of their prototype aircraft. There's a couple of SR-71s, and there's an F-8 Crusader that has called a supercritical wings, a very flat wing. Yes, and the I don't know if you remember the $6 Million Man.
Yeah, of course.
That crash at the beginning of that lifting body thing, it's called the HL-10. There's a HL-10 in this museum.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is the sort of thing that I go hunting for. Yes, like all the other av geeks, I spend time at Myrtle Avenue by Heathrow Airport taking pictures of the planes landing. But going and finding these more exotic aircraft in the middle of deserts or Greek Air Force bases, that's what I really like doing.
What other shows have you been doing that could be?
Well, I go to Duxford every summer, and I go to those Duxford shows, which I'd recommend to everybody. It's a relatively easy place to get to, just near Cambridge. And if you want to go and see a Spitfire and hear a Spitfire, hear a Merlin engine, it's definitely worth going to do that.
Yeah, it's something that I should do more, actually.
I love that.
I know you do.
Duxford is great. The Battle of Britain ones. They did one where they recreated the Berlin airlift. So there was maybe 45. Every
That's so cool.
very into DC-3, C-47, just going and going and going. And it was just,
That's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, they do a really good job with it
Yeah.
with Duxford.
And I think it's important, it's important to support these museums. And there are many, local museums around the UK, around Europe, that are all run by volunteers. And, if you can support your local aviation museum, just go along and have a wander around.
Do you go the same way you went out, or you wait to specifically go to see every single Concorde in existence? Do you do that for specific air shows? Maybe you have a friend that told you that, there's this aircraft that will fly, or there's this aircraft that is there. Do you do that the same way?
A little bit, although not as much, because I've got a job. So but you
get to travel with your job.
Yeah, that stops me. But I did, I was fortunate that the AN 225 visited Bryce Norton 3 years ago. So I was able to go and see that, obviously before it was destroyed earlier this year. So that was great to be able to do that. And, there were 400 of us that, appeared out of nowhere to go and see this aircraft landing because, the rumor mill had picked up I think it was dropping off a helicopter that had been in Iraq at the RAF base. So
wow.
We all went to see that.
Do you go to things like Farnborough and Paris and Dubai?
Yeah, Farnborough is a sad shadow of what it used to
really?
be.
Is it?
Gosh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, when I was a child, a teenager, we all used to go on the train to Farnborough, and it would be, a 2 or 3 day air show. You'd see the Red Arrows and SR-71s or whatever. Now, and there was a trade show, obviously, and that was the main reason for Farnborough. But now the air show pretty much no longer exists. It's just
a trade show.
Yeah. And if you want to go and buy, a seat, or you want to buy a washer for your particular design of airliner, you can go and do that. But there's no air show anymore.
I didn't know that was the case.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know it's largely because the airfield has been built up. It's houses all around it now. And post the Shoreham crash of a few years ago, you can't really fly fast jets.
Yeah.
In the same way, which is, I guess that's.
I suppose Eastbourne is really the one that you can do that because everything's done over the water.
Yeah. So air shows over beaches are the big thing at the moment. Both here in Europe, you have your Bournemouth, Eastbourne, some shows in other parts of the UK, and also in the States now they're becoming more and more popular. I think the air show at Huntington Beach is one of the biggest shows now.
My niece was stationed at Pensacola, and they have a huge one there as well. So I want to add it to the list.
Yeah. But I'm an av geek. I've always been an av geek. I love airplanes.
Is there a show in Barbados so you can actually go back?
If there is, I'll be there.
Honey, I need to go to Barbados because I need to photograph that plane.
Bucket list.
We can move on to BA unless you want to add something about air shows, Alex.
No. I'm just a fan.
We know, guys, we're based in the UK, so obviously we have big optics on BA because it's our traditional airline. It's the airline we will fly the most. This is why we talk about. But we have someone that's probably flown BA more than both of us combined, who's also loyal. And besides the status that we'll get to, do you fly anything else than BA?
Oh, and I fly lots of things other than BA.
Okay, because it feels like sometimes you only fly BA.
No, but as you say, it's being based in London, and I often fly around Europe or off to North America. BA is often the easiest, most convenient flight. And I've just got a look. I don't know how many of you have noticed this. One of the few things on the BA website that's kind of reliable and works reasonably often is the My Flight Path feature.
It's weird and sad that I knew you were going to say. It's one of the few things I was like, he's going to say that works.
Yeah, it works. So it's the My Flight Path feature. I don't know if hardly anyone notices
crap.
it. So this is my history with British Airways. Going back to 2000 was when I joined the BA Executive Club.
Okay, that's a lot.
And I've flown, 1,637,069 miles with British Airways. 19 weeks in the air. Visited 96 cities, 43 countries, 1.1 times the Moon Earth orbit.
Wow.
Quite sure.
Okay, so you've been. I get loyalty. I tend to be like a bee and trying different programs. Now that I fly less, for 2023, especially, I think I'm going to wind down a lot of programs. I cannot sustain 4 programs or whatever. So I understand that you'd be very loyal. And also, again, because when we're in London, it's true that it's the easiest option. There's more flights, and if there's an issue in the morning, there will be another aircraft, whereas if you fly something else, it might not.
Yeah.
So how is it, maybe let's put it that way, how has BA evolved in how many did you say, 2000 and...
So 2000, I joined the executive club, yeah.
2000, okay.
Okay, so like 22 years. Okay, we can remove the 2 years of COVID if you want, but do you, because, there's guys, if you don't live in the UK, and maybe you have the same at home, there's this constant discussion about how it used to be better. But in life, we all tend to think it used to be better. And it's just because actually we all think that it was better because we were simply younger. And when you're younger, you tend to have less expectations. And also when we get older, we tend to idealize the past. So was it actually really better, or do you think?
I think it's been variable, to be honest. There have been times,
variable is very appropriate.
There have been times when it's been much better. There have been times actually when it's been worse than now. And it's complicated, It's a big organization, and I think our relationship as passengers with airlines is complicated as well.
Of course, yeah.
Early on, my experience with British Airways was kind of almost before, booking flights on the internet was a thing. So you used to book flights with travel agents. So that whole element of the products didn't exist as such. And then you came online, and then, the whole experience of, as you get more senior in your role, you kind of work more towards the front of the airplane, ideally. So your experience changes as well. But I think it's been bumpy, I think. Sometimes it's been a great experience. Sometimes it's been terrible. There are, I think, consistencies in terms of the flight crew are always super professional and always very communicative when you compare it to other airlines.
When you say flight crew, you're talking about cockpit crew.
Cockpit crew.
Yeah. I completely agree with that.
You can often be in an American airline and the cockpit crew might not even talk to you. Whereas with British Airways, you always get the pilot, as soon as the door's closed, the pilot's going to come on and talk to you. And correct. I appreciate that consistency. And they're always kind of very smooth and very, top ho chaps, and as you'd expect a British pilot to be. But the rest of the experience has been all over the shop. The hard product has been, to be frank, poor for quite a long time. It's now clearly improving. It's variable, and I think that's just the reality.
But do you, besides the fact that you've now almost kind of bought in, you still live in London, it's still the best option out of London. Besides that, you've bought in and you have Avios and there's a lot of this accounting. Would you ever consider, has there been a point where you say, enough of this? This is not BA bashing, by the way, because we know BA is a great brand and a great airline, but we've all seen the gaps.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think it's never been that bad, actually.
Oh, wow.
My experience with them. Because I've always taken the view that any one flight can be brilliant or it can be terrible.
Correct.
And, to be fair, any cabin crew can be having a bad day.
Agreed.
A seat can be broken on an airplane. The flight entertainment system might not be working particularly well on a particular day. These things happen. And because it isn't consistently bad or isn't consistently good, you kind of go along with it. For me, the reason I fly mostly British Airways is because it's convenient. If there was more competition, hey, that would be great.
Yeah.
And I would make the most of it. But to be honest, if you live in London, you're going to end up flying British Airways most of the time, probably.
You mentioned North America. Do you use AA sometimes to try it out?
Yeah, I suppose the thing that has changed recently, I guess not so recently, but the whole alliance thing is something that you do think about. So I'm One World now, so I will try American and now Alaska in America. And yeah, so I will keep to the alliance where I can, because you get status, you get miles. They've got you.
Yeah. Would you fight for your status on BA, Alex?
No, I am going down to silver. I think in March. There's no way I'm going to get my.
I think same. I think I have one shot before, because I'm renewing on March as well. I think end of March. I have one shot to maybe get, but I'm not sure I'm going to get gold.
And to be honest, I don't think, certainly the impression I get over the last couple of years, and maybe this is just still the shadow of COVID. I don't think the airlines are that bothered about your loyalty particularly. I don't.
It doesn't
really see
feel
that.
like that. I mean,
No.
we talk. I think you and I talk on the show a lot, and we talk on Twitter or things. And you go on Flyer Talk. Flyer Talk is an interesting beast because it's basically people like us. But what bothers a lot of people on Flyer Talk, I don't even think about. Like
same.
The flowers in the toilet. I don't give a crap. I look at these experiences not just as a frequent flyer, but also too often, and this is a little bit of self-flagellation, with my customer experience hat on. And the thing that kills me about BA, A, is the inconsistency, and I couldn't agree with you more, but also procedurally dropping things that seem to be such low-hanging fruit.
Oh, but we talked about, you can say it live now, we talked about the recognition of your status.
And that used to certainly be a thing. I certainly remember, I've been a gold member of British Airways for probably 20 years. I've been gold guest list for 5 years. I'm a gold member for life now.
Let's talk about GGO quickly.
All right.
What one needs to do to attain it,
so
what it is, actually, for those who don't know. Yeah.
So the gold guest list is the status above gold. There's another status above gold guest list, which is the black card that you have to spend enormous amounts of money corporately with British Airways to be given one, or be a VVIP and you'll be given a black card. But the gold guest list is for very frequent travelers. You need to get 5,000 tier points in a year to get
just in 1 year list. Over your year.
Let's give an example. London to New York would probably, in economy, would probably yield 60 or 70 tier points,
something like that. Probably.
Yes. So 5,000 is pointy end a lot.
It's pointy end a lot,
and a lot.
Yeah,
really a lot.
Yeah. It's really a lot. And once you get it goes down to, I think, 3,500 points to maintain it. But it's still a lot.
Oh, you still need to maintain it.
You still need to maintain it. And I, like you guys, looking forward the year, I don't think I'll maintain it next year. But the benefits it gives you are probably most valuable for me. It gives you a status that you can give your family. So I can give my wife a gold card. I can give my kids silver cards, which is great for them because they get lounge access when they're traveling on their own, and they get the benefits that gives them.
That's cool.
You get a dedicated telephone line that you can call.
Oh, even more dedicated than
Even
gold.
more dedicated than gold.
Is it working though?
No.
Because these days, even when you try to call the gold executive, you're like, I'm waiting as well. So
yeah. You may wait slightly less.
Yeah, exactly. Fair enough.
You get supposedly, and this has never really worked for me, you supposedly get additional capability to book flights with your Avios points when there's no other availability.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, but it never worked, you said.
That's never really worked for me.
Maybe because of
I wonder if that's an IT.
The routes.
I think it's more likely an IT kerfuffle than anything else.
Every time I try to get reward flights, I'm going, it's just a nightmare, this thing.
Yeah.
It never works. I'm sorry.
And once upon a time, you would get invited along to events. So certainly pre-COVID, I was invited on maybe one or two occasions to meet BA executives in sales or marketing. I once met Alex Cruz at...
was he the then CEO?
He was then CEO at a hotel. I forget which hotel it was in London. Yeah, it was drinks, canapes, thank you for your loyalty, blah, blah, blah. I did have a go at him about the shocking state of BA's IT systems, which he didn't really appreciate, I don't think.
Really? I mean,
and this was 5 or 6 years ago. BA have had terrible
was
IT
it before and
forever.
after the meltdown, the famous meltdown in 2016?
I think this was before
17?
Which
17?
meltdown? Yeah. It was it's probably before the meltdown. And, it's kind of eyes glazed over. Yeah. Thank you very much for your loyalty. Blah,
It
blah,
feels
blah.
it feels this never ending story, that
Yeah.
IT thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's terrible. I like all of us, in sometimes feeling particularly frustrated, I'll vent on social media or on Twitter or somewhere. And actually, the BA guys that look after that, they run their social
Great.
media, are brilliant.
So good.
And I
great.
feel
That
so
team
sorry
is
for them.
so
They have to
good.
carry the can all of the time for these, other things. That
By the way,
fall
I have
down.
I'm not going to say it, but you probably have it as well, that they have an email, which is only the social media team. And sometimes they find it an issue, I actually email them, not the traditional customer service, because these guys will fix something.
They're
right?
great. They really are great.
They are
they're
truly
amazing.
outstanding.
Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing.
And they take the can for all of the, the underinvestment literally over the decades of their IT. I think,
Of course, yeah.
I do book flights with loads of other airlines. I book, direct with airlines. I book via, other travel agencies online and so on. BA's IT systems are just shocking across the board. Half the time I log in to see my future bookings and I
They're
can't
not
see.
there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where is it?
I don't know what's going on.
I know.
See, it's interesting because you can underinvest in the product, right? And you can take away an olive on a canapé and save. I mean, there was the old business school anecdote about how much that saved. I think it was United Airlines when they did something like that. And you eventually get used to it. This is now the level of service.
You
that I
normalize
expect.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it's something that is functional, the underinvestment has got to be affecting the bottom line of the airline.
Yeah.
When you can't book or when you can't redeem, that actually may go in their
Or
favor.
it forces you to, I cannot access what I need, so I need to call them. So they need frontline people to answer a simple query.
Or I can't dispatch flights. I can't do weight and balance, or anything like that. That surely has bitten them in the ass. And I know, what year was it where they redid basically their airport operation software?
Oh yeah, it's a couple of years ago.
Was it called now Fly?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah. And that was a disaster. And those things, that happens.
Yeah, it happens
when you
with
re-architect
software.
something
Yeah.
That's critical to operations, invariably it's going to throw up all over itself, right? But it seemed to last for months and months and months. But so I don't understand that, and I also still fail to understand that someone like you, with 1.6 million miles, 20 years of ostensibly the top status, really, for all intents and purposes, they've taken away the one thing that made you feel valued, which was,
Hello,
Mr. Parsons.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Good to see you again. Cost, zero.
Yes.
Value, limitless.
Huge. Yes.
Absolutely right.
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
Absolutely
Why?
right.
Yes.
Why?
It's a low-hanging
It is
fruit.
not a time-saving thing. I refuse to believe it.
And
No,
a
it's
number of
not.
times I've sat down and you can see the purser or the CSD looking at their iPad because they've all got the passenger list on their.
They know where they
and
are.
you can see the status next to the name.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. It's not a technological thing. The
It's
data
very-
is right there
Yes.
on the front
Yes.
lines. This stuff really, really bothers me. And during the pandemic, I flew almost every 6 weeks to California in whatever year it was, 2020. And there was 8 of us on the airplane. And I kept running into the same cabin crew. It was a
Obviously.
skeleton cabin crew running on the Dreamliners. And they would come and say, good to see you again. Welcome back. What can I do? I'm going to go get you a blanket from first class. I'll bring you some champagne and probably the starters. I did not expect that to continue, but in the past, they would at least go, I'll bring you a champagne from first class. Or even if I asked, when they came and do the drinks run, they've got the iPad or the piece of paper there, and I'd say, can I have some bubbles? They're like, no, of course you can't. Even before this had been enhanced away, and for our listeners, I enhanced in quotation marks because that's the euphemism that's used. And it really does feel like it is a procedural change to stop doing this.
Yes.
Even before that had been implemented, you would say when you were in economy, can I have a glass of bubbles? They're like, no. Oh, they look at the iPad and go, yeah, just give me a minute. and they would go and get it. And you would feel amazing. At least I would.
It's a small gesture.
Yeah.
It's a very small gesture.
Maybe it's a loss of corporate memory. Because if you look at the crews now, they are different. They're,
Yes.
I think we can all remember the times where there were, not to put too fine a point on it, quite senior from an age point of view,
Yes.
members of staff on every British
Correct.
Airways flight who'd been there
Correct.
forever and ever, knew how it worked, and, knew the systems front and back, and they knew what customer service meant
Yeah.
from the old days of probably BRAC, BEA, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, it appears that generation has gone.
Well,
and-
also BA took opportunity of the pandemic
they took
to
that,
do
absolutely.
the restoration they were
to be
dreaming about for
Yeah.
years. And
To
then
be
they said,
fair, they were not the only ones that did that.
no,
They
no,
were
of
not
course
the
not.
only- Yeah.
but
This
that's
is not
fair to
BA
them.
bashing, guys,
Yeah,
by
yeah.
the way. This is not BA bashing.
no,
We're-
but I think that sense of what it meant to be, a service proposition was lost, and it might be actually, it's just the meta trend of saying, well, there are only really low cost carriers now outside of the ME3. Actually,
I think that's an easy excuse, though.
I agree.
yeah, it is an easy excuse, but I think that's the mindset.
Yeah. And I mean, to reinforce Paul's point, I don't see this as BA bashing at all. I see it as the lamenting of a deterioration that we were
Correct.
all rather fond of.
Yeah.
And also because BA, and I'm compared to you two, and to many of you who are listening, it's an airline that is storied. Maybe it's the myth part of it, because again, I've been living in the UK only for 12 years, and I didn't really travel BA before that. And even within that time frame of 12 years, I really started traveling BA in the last 8.
Yeah.
But they were the first one to actually do like a proper, what we now expect as a business class. So they were actually innovating as well. And it's an airline that evokes something to a lot of people anywhere in the world. That's what I mean, that you kind of maybe your expectations are higher than United.
Yeah.
No United bashing. We have United people listening to us. We're not bashing you guys. But you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so maybe that difference, that delta between what we have in our mind as an image of what BA should be and what it is also creates that kind of frustration,
Yeah.
because it's really
And-
frustration we're
And
expressing.
maybe,
here.
there is that nostalgia bit. We started off
Well, of
talking
course,
about
yeah.
Concorde, very nostalgic. Actually, British Airways now, well, it's the English, but the British brand of IAG.
Correct.
And actually, there's an awful lot of overlap, in customer experience and the way things operate between all the IAG airlines now.
yes.
And, sometimes you couldn't tell the difference if you didn't look on the outside of the airplane and see what color it was painted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a trend that just continues.
Yeah, but that's the same if you look at the Lufthansa group,
Yeah.
between Swiss, Austrian, and Lufthansa, Dolomiti or whatever. You can feel a merge because, of course, they group buy stuff for the hard product, and they probably have like similar trainings as well. So I think that's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Like we said earlier, a sameness happens, maybe.
It feels it's frustrating because in the late 90s and early 2000s, when they were really pushing the whole world's favorite airline thing, you did feel it,
You did. Yep.
especially in business class. I mean, you felt
Huge difference.
they were the first airline, I think, to really do like proper duvets and lie flat beds, and you felt like this is an exemplar of brand Britain.
Yeah.
And you
Yes.
had the you had the cheekiness of Virgin and the Cool Britannia side of it, and the sort of more refined British Airways, and they worked very harmoniously. I mean, they fought like cats and dogs, but that was fine. But there was a nice counterbalance if you wanted the sort of the cheekiness of Virgin, or you wanted the quiet sophistication of Club World.
Yes.
That differentiator seems to have evaporated. And the only thing that's left of that legacy of the Imperial Airways BOAC stuff is, as you said at the top of this kind of segment, the flight deck crew and how they carry themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where they reinvent themselves from, if they have any appetite to do that in the first place.
Yeah. You just like them to innovate.
Yeah.
They innovated enormously. They
Yeah.
brought in
the
business
seats,
class. They brought in, in many ways, they brought in premium economy as something that we kind of now recognize. And, they innovated a lot around the meal service and all sorts of things in their time. But when was the last time the British Airways really innovated?
Yeah.
So just going back, because you mentioned a lot of the benefits you have with DGL The one you didn't, and I'm sure our listeners will want to know, is that famous Concorde Room.
Yes.
Which I don't have access to and I've never been at, which I want to know about.
So if you know the lounge complex at Heathrow, the southern end of the Terminal 5, you'll know the first class lounge, and that's where you get in. If you go in the first class wing, you get dumped out into the first class lounge, which is mostly for gold card holders.
Correct.
If you walk across the kind of the entrance past the showers, walking towards the main part of the terminal, you come into the Concorde Room, which is really for people who are traveling first class, so ticketed first class passengers. And it's a smaller, slightly more upmarket version of the lounge, nicer carpets, nicer chairs. It's an at-seat service, on-demand service. It's a nice bar. There are more staff there. There was, a period of time over the last couple of years where, it wasn't that good, to be honest. But it's caught up. The staff there are now much more engaged and much better than they have been. And, it's I guess, what you would expect a first-class lounge to be. You might say, well, that's what the gold lounge should be, but that's kind of what it is. It's a bit more intimate, it's a bit smaller, has the nose from a Concorde, probably the one that the Air France scrapped as a feature in the building. And also, apparently, I'm going to try this out in January. I can now get access to the new lounges at Terminal 7 at JFK.
Oh, that's exciting.
So they just moved last month, I think.
Yeah, just
very
last month.
interested to hear how
that will
is.
be interesting.
There was this image that I shared with you that I found somewhere. Was it on Reddit? When they were dismantling the old stuff, and you had the sign British Airways, and the only thing that remained was Ish Airways. It's a bit what we're saying about British. It's Ish Airways. Right? So is there any other besides New York and
just New York and Heathrow? The two extra lounges. Oh, I think there used to be access to the lounge in Singapore, but they took that away.
Yeah. Okay. You've been.
I have once with Fergie. He was with me.
No way.
Yeah. I was flying. I found one of those weird fares that I think we dissected many moons ago, where it was cheaper to go in first to Miami on a 747 than it was to go in business on a 777. So somebody else is paying for this, so obviously I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And we went in, and I think it was neat, but I think it might have been in the era that you were describing, where it was less good. It was still neat and great, and we had a grand time. I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I had the feeling like maybe this at one point it was a bit better, because now I read about it on Flyer Talk and other people on doing trip reports, and it does sound really, really good.
It is. I mean, it's a nice environment because
there is the ability to innovate there.
Yeah,
within
maybe.
BA.
I mean, they do a fantastic burger.
This is famous burger, right?
Every time I go.
I want to go.
It is it is famous. It's as really famous as the flowerless toilets.
Yeah. It's a really good burger. You definitely go for that. Yeah, but I've probably got another year of that, and then that will be my GGL done. I will enjoy it.
But something which just kind of touched it, which doesn't only involve BA. We mentioned earlier, I don't remember who was it that said that airlines didn't seem to be fighting for their loyal customers a lot these days.
Yeah, that was an interesting revelation.
And I read a lot, and we thought about a lot that, first of all, 2023 is a year of reckoning, I guess, because a lot of, these COVID programs that were put in place to help, and at some point, they had to stop it, and that's the year where they'll stop it. All across the world, all the airlines are basically putting a stop to them, which means that a lot of corporate customers will lose their status. Some airlines offer kind of a nice parachute, so you're not dumped into zero directly. But the point is, when you have too many people with status, what is status? And sometimes we feel like we talked about it over and over with Alex about BA, the first class lounge, where of course we're in London. Of course there's a lot of corporates with a lot of money, but you enter and you're like, okay, there's no chance of getting an upgrade.
Do you ever get upgraded?
Maybe once a year. I've often thought that there's an algorithm somewhere in BA's dodgy IT system that at some point early in the year, in my membership year, I will get one upgrade, and that will be it.
But it's not like the US Airlines where there's a list.
Number 80 on a domestic flight. There's too many guys with status because, you know, of course, you have the game with credit cards. And so people have 25 credit cards. And I'm not here dissing because I know every time we say that, I'm going to get hate mail. Oh, you know, like, no, it's not that. It's just that too much status is no status.
Yeah.
And have you seen, we talked about this the other day between you and me, Alex, the American airline is revamping the program and they will have 15 loyalty classes. 15. I mean, I don't know what you know, it's become that joke when you're like group 25 and you're still gold or something, right? I'm wondering if a simplification, which because now people are losing their status anyway because they haven't flown, shouldn't be in the cards. Saying, you know, like, I mean, they're doing, sorry, I keep talking. We know Lufthansa is doing that because they pushed it over. The US has already passed that. BA is introducing that, I think, revenue-based programs.
Revenue-based, yeah.
Which makes sense, to be honest.
Of course.
For
in some ways, it makes sense in that, yes, from BA's revenue point of view, they're focusing on the people that pay them the most, but they're not necessarily the most loyal travelers,
correct,
or the people that are choosing BA when they've got another choice. You know, when I travel, I have a budget that my employer set, and so I can, you know, I do my best to make the most of that budget, and that will often mean flying on a discounted business class ticket.
Do you have, if you don't want to mention, you don't have to, do you have like an incentive program? So if you beat the budget?
We do. So we have a scheme where a budget is set, which is probably just a little bit more than the premium economy, usually. And anything that you can budget that's below the cap, you get to credit that. So you can kind of bank that for a future journey.
That's sensible.
So, you know, if you're flying around Europe, who cares?
I would never get any work done because I would just be working on my spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, you know, it goes with the territory here.
Sure.
So you can bank money when you're traveling around Europe to spend long haul, in theory anyway. But it always means that, you know, I'm never paying full fare flexible tickets. Who in their right mind does if you're spending your money or your company's money, to be honest?
I agree.
So I'm always trying to find the best budgeted business class ticket I can. If you move to a revenue-based model, I become much less important to the airline, even though you could argue I'm equally loyal. I'm just not spending as much money.
And that will entice you to be the opposite. You will be less loyal because, you know, if they don't really care now.
Yeah, you would go to somebody who would.
But on the other end, I mean, it's tough. I'm not going to debate that for hours. But I when I flew to Saudi Arabia, the price I paid for that flight, especially the one to Dubai with Emirates, was out of this world insane because everything is fully booked up. And when I see how much credit, how much points I got, Sky Awards, whatever, I'm like, really? Like 3 years ago, I would have paid like a third of this, and it's the same point. So I would love to have to kind of see that I still made the effort to pay that much money. Give me something for it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I mean, so I get both end of the argument, basically.
Yeah.
Right? So
But I think you're right. There's going to be a reset this year, and I think, you know, maybe the first class lounge is going to be a bit quieter next year compared to this year.
I won't be there.
Yeah, I won't be there after March. We get a soft bounce to silver, I think, or at least we used to. I don't know if we will.
I think I'm qualifying for silver. I'm pretty sure. I haven't checked. Anyway,
I don't know anymore.
But it's still, you know, and I would say to people, it's always worth your while being a member. You know, it's important to have a number.
Agreed.
Because, you know, there is a hierarchy always.
Yeah.
So, you know, you need to be on that even if you're at the bottom. It's better than not being on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Even those mileage accrual pops that you get with, you know, bronze, it's worth it. It's worth it because the redemption within Europe, the taxes are almost non-existent. So it's worth getting that extra little bump.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost you anything just to sign up and to put your number every time you
book.
Yeah,
and then unsubscribe.
Do you have, besides, obviously, we just talked about Concorde, that flight that you made with Concorde, but do you have any flights that are particularly memorable for any reason, good or bad? Of course, we just did some bad, that may be good. On any airline, it doesn't have to be BA, obviously. Do you have like one flight, two flights, maybe when you were a kid or maybe recently, something that really stands out?
I'll give you one of each. So, like most of us, I remember my first flight, I think, very well, which was my mother was from Northern Ireland, so I used to fly to Belfast quite often. And this was a flight from Gatwick to Belfast International, as it is now, Aldergrove Airport, on a Vickers Viscount operated by British Midland. So this is for those of you who've never seen one, British 4-engine turboprop aircraft with literally massive windows.
There's one at Duxford. There's one at Duxford you can go inside. So go and do it because it is a beautiful airplane.
Beautiful, and it whistled. It had these turboprop engines that you could hear it whistling as it came along. And the windows were literally from, if you're sitting in a seat, they'd be from your lap to your head. That size, huge. So I remember that because I felt like I was flying. You were just looking out of this huge window. Yeah. And for a child, that was an incredible experience. And actually then a trip that I did just because I thought it would be fun earlier this year was the one to Barra in Scotland, where you land on the beach.
That's the airport of the day. That's the airport of the day. So tell us about that. The flight and the airport.
So you fly from Glasgow to Barra.
Sorry to interrupt. Why did you go there?
Because I wanted to.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there was no reason to go there. I mean, clearly people commute, and it's a major and important business link for the islanders. The flight there.
So Barra is an island.
Barra is an island in the Hebrides, and it's not an airport in a conventional sense. There's a terminal building, very small, a bit like a flying club, to be honest, a bit more like a doctor's waiting room rather than an airport terminal. And you land on the beach. So you take off from Glasgow. It's about an hour, just over an hour's flight. Flying there, for whatever reason, I think the RAF were doing maneuvers. We didn't get above 1,000 feet. So it was just pootling along in this Twin Otter. It was on autopilot, but, you could, literally, because you're sitting right behind the pilot, you can see exactly what's happening. And you land on the beach, and it is just an incredible experience. And so you get out, and I wandered around for an hour or two and waited for the next flight to take me back to Glasgow. But it was one of those things I wanted to do since I was, I'd heard about it. And you land on the beach and there's water there and the spray comes up. And the Twin Otter is just, it's like a flying Ford Transit van.
I think it's such a great beast.
That's
I
a
love
great
that
definition,
airplane.
actually.
It's amazing.
But we've done it on the Maldives, which is not exactly the same temperature and the same.
No, it was quite chilly on Barra. But it was a great experience. And the contrast between, Glasgow, big international airport, and you arrive literally at what feels like a doctor's waiting room. And
so what airline was this?
It was Logan Air.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Scotland's airline.
So was the schedule based on the tides?
Yeah, the schedule was based on the tides. So the tide comes in enough that the runway closes when the tide's in.
The runway, quote unquote.
Yeah, and actually I think there are 2 or 3 one way. And nothing marked. I think there's a kind of an orange triangle on the
so
side
only
of the
daytime
beach.
Flights then.
Yeah, it's only daytime flights. It's only VFR, clearly, official flight rules. And you basically, depending on which direction the wind's blowing, you'll land in that direction, and there are approximately 3 one-ways. But nothing's marked.
That's amazing.
Well, I know what I'm doing next.
And I think that I'm not sure if there was once a service on the plane. I'd heard somewhere that they used to give out Tunnock's tea cakes and Tunnock's caramel bars.
Amazing.
But it was it was literally like a bus. But fabulous.
So did you stay or did you leave right after?
I just wandered around and then came back. So
for the same aircraft, That's amazing. Well, you just said that this airport relies on the tides. Well, here in London, we know when it snows, everything closes, right?
Yeah.
The same idea.
Yeah, they're a bit more hardy in Scotland. I think they cope with this more than we can.
Do you like Heathrow?
No. I know. I think a lot of.
I wasn't expecting that.
A lot of our criticisms of BA actually are probably more criticism of Heathrow.
That's true.
And I think in terms of the responsibility when things go wrong, a lot of that often relies at Heathrow's door. I think it's shocking the way that airport is run.
Let's not talk about what's happening this week and next week. This week you heard, guys, that we've talked that we have an epic scale of the number of strikes that we're having in this country. But next week is going to be pretty damning from Heathrow. And that's the thing. There's no real strikes this week because Border Force, I think, is only tomorrow or whatever. And it's already a mess. Our friends arriving, and it's already a mess. So it's not great. I mean, it's always hard, we say with Alex, to judge an airport when it's your home airport in a way because you don't transit there. It's not bad, but I agree that it's not well run, especially post-pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always going to have limitations based on where it is and the amount of land that it's got and, the volume of traffic that it has to deal with. But that's no excuse for it not being managed as well as it could be. And it just seems that, there are too many people involved. It's overly complicated. There seems to be a relationship of mistrust between the airlines and the people that run the airport, which is never a good position to be in. And, maybe they've been so fixated on the third runway that they've just forgotten about investing
everything
in the
else.
Passenger experience for the people that are still there.
Yeah.
That's not wrong.
Terminal 5, great, but that was built nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah. Do you think they will go? We'll get a third runway there?
No.
No.
Not in my lifetime.
You're young.
Oh,
We'll
you
have
wish,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, no. Come. I mean, I don't know if we should have one.
I think you could probably get away with 2 runways for a lot longer. They could certainly, if you look at Terminal 2, that's half a terminal. There's clearly the space to finish it.
Yes.
You want to knock down the old Terminal 1.
Yeah,
put the other terminals.
Every time you taxi past Terminal 1, you're like,
why do you close it?
It looks cool. Yeah. It's such a waste of space and capacity. I'm sure they know things that we don't. And there's lots of very, very strong reasons.
And I've met people working at Heathrow. They're very good people. I think it's just that one of these operations that is of such scale that there's sometimes it feels the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And,
but you look at the other airports around Europe, you look at the investments they've made in Paris, the continued investments they make in Amsterdam, you have to spend money on the infrastructure. And you can't stand still.
Yeah, that's for sure. So is that where you fly usually from, or you fly Gatwick more?
I try to fly as often as I can from Gatwick.
See? We had that discussion last time.
Yeah.
I think at least they're trying. There's some investment happening.
Yeah.
Well, we have a bit more time. We said, okay, that we'll probably travel a bit less next year. We never know. What are you most looking forward? Because people hearing this will be hearing this on the 31st of December, will be the close of the year. Well, first of all, maybe, was it a good travel year? Because, we met here almost to the dot 3 years ago, so before everything shut down, and now it's kind of back, but not fully. But probably 2023 could be the year when it's fully, let's see, besides the fact that there's a crisis. Did you feel 2022 as a good year for travel for you? Were you happy?
Yeah, I think actually, when I look back at it was probably better than I imagined. We look back to January of this year, certainly in the UK, it was 50-50 whether we'd be entering another lockdown or not.
Yeah.
So I think we've made more progress than I imagined we would do. I certainly traveled more than I thought I was going to. So, are we back to normal? No, clearly not. I think there are still issues in restarting the machine after the COVID lockdown. But I think we've made more progress, and I think it's not been a bad travel year. It's clearly had its problems, and I think there will continue to be some problems. But we're getting there. I think we're getting there.
It's very interesting. First of all, you said you've been traveling more than you thought, because we're standing here at Google, and I can see that it says Google Meet in front of us. So I'm like, you could do a lot on Meet. It's good that they send you still to travel. But to that point, on a personal level, was it a good year for you? Do you travel anything exciting or stuff? I mean, you mentioned a few, but were you happy with your travel this year?
Yeah, I was actually. There was lots of variety. I often end up, traveling across to California for business reasons or to other places in the States. I traveled much more actually on leisure this year than I have done for quite a long time. With the family, we went to Iceland on a vacation, which was lovely. My wife and I went across the Atlantic on Queen Mary 2, came back.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well,
How was that?
I thought I should travel by ship across the Atlantic just to experience how long it took, and it really does take a long time. And so that was fun. So I did much more leisure travel than I have done for many years, and I think, to be fair, we kind of knew travel would be a bit hit and miss, and it would be a bit more difficult, and it was. So I think it kind of lived up to those expectations. So. Yeah, but it was lovely just to be traveling again. And yes, you make the point about from a business point of view, well, surely you can use Meet, and we use Meet and Zoom and all the things you would expect. But actually, I'm sure as we'd all recognize, you can't beat those conversations you have in the corridor over a cup of coffee or bumping into people. And there is still huge value in travel. And I think people recognize that more today than they've ever done.
Flashback of memory. You mentioned Queen Mary. Is it not the Queen Mary one that is moored in LA? Long Beach.
Yeah.
And there was this plane from Howard Hughes, the biggest plane in the world, that now is no longer. They had built this dome. And I think that would be this dome, I think, still exists. It would be a great place for a Concorde now.
There you are.
It would be, yeah.
See? Alex, was it a good year for you, traveling-wise? Were you happy?
Yeah, it's just felt like a long year. But it's definitely, I've had some unique experiences. I think particularly the Maldives was a bucket list for a lot of reasons. And then lots of other adventures as well. So I think I like you, Ed, I traveled more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
It felt relatively normal. Traveling during the pandemic was tiring and stressful and weird. This feels normal again, which is rather lovely. But I am being a lot more like you. I think we've talked about this a lot. For me, a little bit of the joy has been removed from air travel, and the frustrations are much more raw. And there's something missing from it, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and I'm wondering because I've also had I thought I would not travel almost at all this year, and ended up, going to Pakistan and Saudi and to St. Lucia. So I'm very happy. Less travel, but actually travel that was impactful, at least for me. But I agree with what you said, and I keep wondering, is it, of course, it's part of the industry itself, that like you said, Ed, it's a machine that needs restarting. But is it us as well? Maybe the way we perceive travel, unwillingly maybe? I'm not here including Ed. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I feel less enthralled. I love still flying and I love traveling. But there's something and is it because simply got shut down and start again and we got older? I don't know. But it's not exactly the same. I'm still happy when I'm in a flight. I'm still happy when they're big aircraft, especially. You were mentioning earlier that, we'll have like a single aisle. I just read, was it the other day, that Airbus did the 321 XLR. They did a 13-hour without refueling.
Yeah.
We could go to Singapore with that. I don't want to go to Singapore with a single aisle. I want wide bodies, But yeah, I don't know. But I mean, still very happy about the fact that, like you both guys said, we traveled more than expected. And how do you see next year then? Do you have any hopes, whether it's for you or for the travel industry? Obviously, the travel industry we know, but for you?
Yeah, I think the return to normality continues. I think actually I'm going to be traveling less. I think we will have to recognize the economy is in a bit of a sticky state at the moment, so I don't expect to travel as much as I did this year.
Yeah.
But I think actually for the industry as a whole, that's probably not a bad thing, actually. I think it could do with a little bit of pressure off to sort of restart again. But I think, the finances are going to be a bit sticky for the next year or two. So we shall see. But I don't expect to travel as much, and I'm okay.
And we say that, and we'll meet again in 1 year. Say, I traveled more than I thought.
More than I did.
But we never know. Alex,
sure.
you any?
Yeah, I think the writing is definitely on the wall from a business travel perspective.
Yeah.
But I think I've found myself arriving at the same conclusion as you, Paul, that the travel I want to do in 2023, I want it to have purpose and meaning. And all those places that have been on my list of someday, I'm going to start plucking from that list and building either attaché episodes around them or, taking more adventures with my wife and kids as well. My kids used to travel so much, and then it's just.
Well, also they're becoming older, so it's nice.
Yeah, I think they'll have different perspectives on it as well. So, and
it's nice to have since you just mentioned Megan, that there's so many places that she doesn't know. You might do, but
I mean, all of Asia. I think now Asia is opening back up. Hong Kong is finally fully reopened, and I can't wait to take her there and my kids back to places like that were part of my kind of identity.
Yeah.
I
feel the same. I will. The only downside of traveling coming back to normal, and hopefully it's going to be next year, which would be shorter than we thought it would take 4 or 5 years. is the shadow of potential over tourism again. So for me, there's a few places that have, like you, on my bucket list that I kind of want to hit faster than later. Saying there's still not too many people, or they haven't returned yet.
So tell us where we should go. Where are the places?
No, the one that you probably have been, but I've never been, is simply I want to go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
Yeah.
And because Chinese haven't restarted traveling yet, it's still quiet-ish. I mean, not quiet. It's not lockdown quiet, right? And as a also keen photographer like you are, I do not photograph planes, but I like architecture. I want to see it without having like 2 million people in front of me trying to take the selfie in front of the sun setting or rising. So I might, I don't know, I might, because like Alex said, also, we are, both of us, Alex and I, we are consultants. I mean, we have our own small businesses, and we cannot escape the reality of the economy. So, thank God I have a lot of miles. So I'm going to
use them wisely.
I'm going to use them wisely. There's no Concorde for me to try, so I'll have to do and Japan. I have to go. You've been, right?
We have family in Japan, so I love traveling to Japan. So I'm very happy that it's slowly reopening again.
Yeah, I will definitely go. So I think we're closing in, guys. We keep telling that we want to have guests. We never do, and then we have, and then now we'll have.
See you in 3 years, Ed.
Alex and Ed do not realize how many emails I'm going to get now because, but you told me I could be a guest, and you never did. So you do have guests, and now I'm going to be. Alex, be ready next year to have a lot of those actually coming up. But besides, if you have any last words. Thank you so much, Ed.
It's been my pleasure. It's been always. I'm a huge fan, obviously. I love listening to the show. Extra special if I can listen to the show when I'm in an aeroplane. So, but keep up the good work, guys. And I think, as a representative of the audience, we love what you guys do. So just keep going.
No,
thank you for having us.
It's true to what just Ed said, that we have had in the past 2 weeks a lot of people telling us, I'm listening to you back in an aircraft. It's so cool. I'm thinking, who is it? Michael, I think, is going to Haneda. Probably you are in the flight right now, actually, and listening to the previous episode, because this one is not out. So thank you, all of you, and Happy New Year, I guess.
Safe travels, guys, if you're going anywhere.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy flying. There you go.
There you are.
See you in 2023. That's done.